Greetings and welcome to the Synidotech channel. Today, we have an exciting tutorial prepared for you on how to map the Synido TempoPAD to your DAW software. Let's dive right in and get started with the mapping process. In this comprehensive tutorial, we will provide step-by-step instructions on mapping the versatile Synido TempoPAD to three popular DAW software: Ableton Live, FL Studio, and Cubase. Whether you're a musician, producer, or enthusiast, this guide will help you unleash the full potential of your TempoPAD in each of these software environments. So, without further ado, let's begin our journey and explore the mapping process. Let's get started with mapping the Synido TempoPAD in Cubase Pro 12. First, start Cubase Pro 12 and create a new project or open an existing one. Once the software is launched and the project is ready, we need to configure the MIDI port settings. To do this, go to Studio, then Studio Setup, then MIDI port setup. In the MIDI port setup window, make sure to activate the port associated with the Synido TempoPAD. Simply tick the checkbox next to the visible option for the Synido TempoPAD port. If the checkbox is already ticked, it means that the port is already open and recognized by Cubase Pro 12. At this point, your track should be able to recognize the TempoPAD as a MIDI input device. However, in order to control the corresponding software functions, we need to map the knobs and buttons on the TempoPAD. Let's proceed with the mapping process to enable manipulation of the software functions. To start mapping the Synido TempoPAD, navigate to the MIDI Remote option. Select Open MIDI Remote in lower zone. This will open the MIDI remote in the lower zone, allowing you to begin the mapping process for the Synido TempoPAD. Within the MIDI Remote Editor window, locate the plus sign, plus, symbol. Click on the plus sign, plus, symbol to create a new MIDI controller mapping table. A new MIDI controller mapping table will be created for you to work with. In the newly created MIDI controller mapping table, provide the device information, including the model number. Set the input and output for the device. If Synido is not listed as a vendor, click on Add Vendor at the bottom of the vendor list. Complete the required information in the form provided. Click on Create MIDI Control Surface. You should now have successfully created the MIDI control surface. Begin mapping the corresponding buttons on the Synido TempoPAD device. In order to map all the buttons on the Synido TempoPAD, you must first choose the function of the respective category on the left side of the MIDI Remote Editor window. Then, twist or press each control on the device to assign them accordingly. Repeat the same process for the lower transport control buttons. If necessary, you can resize the controls by dragging the bottom right corner of each control. Additionally, you have the option to adjust the layout of the controls to enhance their visual appeal. Now that you have completed the initial setup, let's move on to linking the features of the Synido TempoPAD. To begin, click on the bottom right corner of the screen where it says, Go to Mapping Assistant. This will take you to the feature linking section. In the upper right corner, you will find a small icon. Click on it to open the Functions Browser function. The Functions Browser will now be displayed, showing various options for mapping. Choose the button or knob on the TempoPAD that you wish to map. Click on it to select. On the right side of the screen, you will find a list of corresponding features. Locate the feature that matches the one you selected on the TempoPAD, and double-click on it to complete the mapping process. Congratulations! You have successfully linked the desired features of the Synido TempoPAD using the Mapping Assistant. Now, let's continue the mapping process and explore additional functionalities of the Synido TempoPAD in Cubase Pro 12. We'll first demonstrate the mapping process for the transport functions. To map the transport buttons, select the corresponding button on the TempoPAD and choose the desired function within Cubase Pro 12. Similarly, you can assign functions to the transport buttons based on your specific requirements. However, in this case, we won't be mapping the pad, as we'll be using it for performing purposes without the need for specific mapping. Once you have completed the mapping for the knobs, buttons, and transport, it's time to close the Mapping Assistant, as the device's mapping process is now complete. Now, let's explore an alternative method for controlling the transport using MMC, MIDI Machine Control, mode. To utilize MMC mode, you'll need to adjust the transport settings on the Synido TempoPAD control panel first. Please note that if the MIDI port is currently being used by the DAW software, you will need to exit the DAW completely before proceeding with the software editor. Ensure that the DAW software is closed and not running in the background. Once the DAW software fully closed, you can turn on the software editor for the Synido TempoPAD. Once the transport settings are set to MMC mode, return to Cubase Pro 12. In Cubase Pro 12, navigate to Transport, then Project Synchronization Setup, then Machine Control. Select MMC Slave Active in the Machine Control settings. Click OK to confirm the settings. Once this setup is completed, you can now control the transport functions through the MMC signals sent from the Synido TempoPAD. However, please note that if you are using MMC signals, it's important to avoid mapping the buttons in the transport area within Cubase Pro 12. If any buttons in the transport area are inadvertently mapped, make sure to delete those mappings to ensure proper control. With these settings and adjustments, your Cubase Pro 12 setup is complete. Congratulations! You now have comprehensive control over both the mapped functions and transport control in Cubase Pro 12 using your Synido TempoPAD. Stay tuned as we proceed to our next DAW software, Ableton Live, to explore the mapping process there. Let's now explore the mapping process for Ableton Live 11.2 using the Synido TempoPAD. To begin, make sure your Synido TempoPAD is connected and turned on before launching Ableton Live. Once the device is ready, open Ableton Live and navigate to Options, then Preferences. In the Preferences window, select Link Tempo MIDI from the options. Locate the Synido TempoPAD in the MIDI ports section and ensure that the tracks and external controls are enabled for its inputs and outputs. By doing this, Ableton Live can now accept signals from your TempoPAD, but no functional mapping has been done yet, so there won't be any response from the software. To proceed with the mapping, click on the MIDI button located in the upper right corner of Ableton Live to enter the mapping browser. Once in the mapping browser, all mappable items will be highlighted in blue. Click on the button you wish to map. The selected button will have a white outer frame indicating it has been chosen. Next, press the corresponding button on the Synido TempoPAD to complete the mapping process. The mapping process for knobs is similar. Select the knob you want to define within Ableton Live. Twist the corresponding knob on the TempoPAD to complete the mapping. In Ableton Live, you have the option to set the maximum and minimum values for the mapped knob. However, it is recommended to keep the parameters consistent between the device control panel and the DAW software. Adjust the parameters within the DAW software when needed. Once the setup is complete, remember to save your project in your preferred directory for future use. This way, you won't have to remap the controls every time you use the Synido TempoPAD. Congratulations! You have successfully mapped your Synido TempoPAD in Ableton Live. Now you can fully utilize the capabilities of the TempoPAD in your Ableton Live production workflow. Stay tuned for our next segment as we explore mapping in another DAW software. Now, let's proceed with the mapping process in FL Studio 20.9 using the Synido TempoPAD as our MIDI controller. Before opening FL Studio, make sure your Synido TempoPAD is connected and turned on. Once the device is ready, launch Florida Studio and navigate to Options, then MIDI Settings. In the MIDI Settings window, locate and select Synido PAD16. Click on Send Master Sync and ensure that Synido PAD16 is enabled by clicking Enable below. Once the device is enabled, you can proceed with the mapping process. In FL Studio, controlling the transport controller via CC signals is not possible. Therefore, you'll need to adjust the transport control to MMC signals and use the universal control directly. To map a knob in FL Studio, right-click on the knob you want to control and select Link to Controller. Then, twist the corresponding knob on the Synido TempoPAD to complete the mapping. If you want to map knobs within plugins, you'll need to first use the mouse to adjust the desired switch or knob. Then, go to the menu bar, click Tools, then Last Tweaked, then Link to Controller. Twist the knob on the TempoPAD that you want to control to complete the mapping. Remember to save the mapping with the project. While FL Studio also offers global mapping, it is not recommended for most scenarios. However, if you prefer to use it, Simply change the setting from Link to Controller to Override Global Link. Once all the settings and mappings are done, your FL Studio mapping process is complete. Keep in mind that FL Studio may have some functions that cannot be mapped. It's essential to try and verify if the mapping is successful and whether the desired functions in the DAW software can be mapped. In conclusion, each DAW software follows a different logic, and you may need to experiment and verify the success of the mapping process and the availability of mapping functions within the software. Thank you for watching this tutorial on mapping the Synido TempoPAD in DAW software. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay updated with future content.